website. All electronic devices, including mobile phones, should be switched to silent. So I'm Deputy Catherine Curtis, the chair of the panel.
My name's Mark Labby, Constable of Greville, Vice Chair.
Deputy Helen Miles of St Brelard, I'm a member of the panel.
I'm Deputy Monfortelli. I've joined the panel for this review from the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny panel.
Deputy Rob Ward, Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning.
Deputy Karina Rowles, Assistant Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning.
I'm Keith Posner, Interim Chief Officer in SIPES.
Stuart Penn, Head of Skills.
Jo Terry Marchant, Principal of Highlands College and University College, Jersey.
Tanya Jackson, Policy Officer.
Okay, thank you everybody. We just have 1 hour for this hearing, so we'll try and keep the questions brief and answers. So just some general questions to start with. Minister, the panel notes that increasing lifelong learning and future skills provision is a stated CSP priority. So can you just briefly say what specific measures are being introduced under this commitment to ensure equitable access?
Yeah, I think looking for any specific areas within such a wide remit is difficult. There's two things. First of all, I think this might sound slightly odd, but just introducing the title and changing it has changed the dialogue, and we're starting to look at education both post-16 and beyond, and indeed beforehand, but I know the remit isn't.
Lifelong learning.
Yeah, to actually look at those things that are happening. A number of things have happened across the remit, particularly in higher education. We've made a number of significant changes. I know it's not for this panel at the moment, but there are a number of things that have happened there. We certainly have done recently a lot of work into the apprenticeships structure and the changes that will, I believe, need to be made in the longer term. I will say, though, that one of the things that I've been very pleased with is that we don't start from a 0 point, and I want to make this point really carefully. We have a very successful apprenticeship scheme in place, particularly up at Highlands, but for all providers. We have a lot of successes. 440 on apprenticeships, both apprenticeships and higher. We don't start from a 0 base, but that does not mean we don't want to look further and improve that, and not just improve it, but make it the right structure into the future and into the changing environment we have on this island.
Okay, great. And I know the panel was really pleased to see the new report, the stakeholder perspectives, because it was in late 2024 that we brought an amendment to the budget for a review on apprenticeship funding. So we're pleased to see what's happening now. So I was going to ask you about your assessment of the current provision, but you said you're starting from a good point. But do you think there's sufficient accessibility for different groups like disabled people and neurodivergent learners?
Yeah, there will always be, I think, a need to improve accessibility across particular groups within our society for two reasons. First of all, thankfully, as a society, we recognise more that there is diversity within our population, and we don't put that diversity just into a corner and ignore it. And I think that is a huge step forward for us. But part of that means we have to respond to that in what we provide. I know Highlands College do a lot of work to support students. Perhaps, Jo, in a moment, you might want to talk through a few of those things, so from the principal yourself. But I think across our wider piece in terms of apprenticeships, there is work to be done. It's part of the report that we've produced, that dialogue with stakeholders. I think it does recognise that. I think it's about a partnership here between what we do in government, what we do with our providers that are our government providers, our schools, our colleges, but also with employers themselves and what they need to step up and take that role as well. How can we support that and make it work? And I think that's the dialogue that needs to happen from now on.
And that's going to be part of your
Absolutely.
Work. Okay. Are there forecasts or targets set by the department around participation or completion? Are there targets for the coming years?
Our completion... would you like to name the continuation rate, Jo? Because I know you're very proud of it for our apprentices.
97%. Positive destinations actually for the whole college, which is movement into employment if they're on a full-time course. The apprenticeships are already in employment, obviously. That can be a potential barrier in the sense that every apprentice that applied to us got a place on the apprenticeship scheme, but if they're not employed, then they can't be an apprentice. They have to be in employment.
And I think when we came up to the college, we found that there was a problem. This is last year.
Yeah.
I think with some of the young people not being able to get a position at the end of their
Yeah.
course.
And can I say, and that's exactly the thing that we need to look at into the future from the work that we've been doing. We can train, we can provide the courses, we can be creative with the courses that are there. There are new things coming forward that we can't talk about entirely because there are stakeholders that don't want us to talk about it entirely, but there are some really positive things coming forward into the future and investment there. But you're right, we need to make sure they have destinations at the end of it. And also, I think, see, the problem is if it's not working and training, which is what I suppose we would call an apprenticeship, we're talking about a different form of qualification. Now, they do exist, though. There are, certainly for 16 to 19-year-olds, the JPQ.
Yes, so the Jersey Progression Qualification, if we have a student that's unable to seek an employment and apprenticeship area or is not ready because they don't have the required background and qualifications, we have the Jersey Progression Qualification, which is a general qualification gives them basically tasted into all the sector areas, and they progress from there onto either apprenticeships or advanced level study. And the achievement rates are excellent on that as
I know
well.
there's been good
Sometimes they need another year.
there's been good feedback on that
Good,
as well, hasn't there?
good,
from
pleased.
Can I ask about the JPQ? So is the JPQ Jersey specific, or is it transferable or nationally recognised?
It is recognised by qualification by further education institutions in the UK, and it's also recognised by the industries locally. It was designed in combination with employers to meet their needs, and it's accredited by it's the second largest awarding body in the United Kingdom.
Can I just make a little point on that, Deputy? Because it's a really important point. There is a changing world of those qualifications,
Yeah,
which
we
we are very
we're gonna
aware
have
of.
more questions
A lot
on
of
that
work
as
has
well.
already gone on. I know, Tanya, you've been involved with communication with DFE. We're having meetings, another meeting, I think, 2 weeks' time, to look at how we will be proactive in dealing with, for example, changes to BTEC and the type of qualifications we've used. We are absolutely on top of that, and we will be making representation at both ministerial level and officer level in order to push to where we are. It's not just us, it's all of the Crown dependencies.
So where does the JPQ sit then? Is post GCSE?
Yes, so
level 2.
usually students who enter that will not have got the 5 benchmark GCSEs. They may need an extra year to develop themselves and their skills. So in that, they not only have the core taster of the sectors, they have a wraparound personal development, coaching model, learning support. It's a full, it's
Literacy and
what they're
numeracy.
calling a transition level in the UK, but we got ahead of that starting it in 2016, and we've just had it externally reviewed and updated for renewed delivery this year. So we're all the time improving it.
So what's the accreditation body?
So it's NCFE.
And is that like for 16-year-olds, really?
Yes, well,
16,
16, 17-year-olds.
Yeah,
And then we have a programme for NEETs, etc., etc. There's lots of different programmes.
Leads into what I was going to ask next, which is I was reading about in the UK the plans for the occupational pathway and the academic pathway. So is Jersey looking at doing something similar, or because I know that
Yeah.
JPQ sounds a bit like one of those in some ways as well. Really.
Yeah, I just say, I think that word pathway is really important. That's exactly where we need to go. I think there is a significant overhaul needed. And I don't even think, I know we're not talking about pre-16, but I have to say, I think we need to ensure that at 14 years old, there are very clear and open pathways to all of our students right up to 18 and beyond. And that means a greater participation and cooperation across all of our educational establishments, which I'm sure we wanted to be there. And we have the skills, we have the abilities there across our piece. And I think there is a real opportunity there. Whether we take that model that the UK have, because there are some issues with that model, or whether I think we have something that's more Jersey specific for our economy, our needs, and the industries and the economic areas that are here. economic drivers is the word I'm looking for, that are on this island.
Okay, but there are plans to reconsider or reform the current model and
I think we have to. And I mean, I was going to say this later, but I'll say it early. I think this needs to be at the top of the agenda for whoever is in this post in the coming 4 years. It has to be right at the top of that agenda. And we're doing now the groundwork and the precursory work with the reports that we've been producing, the consultations we've had across industry, and really importantly, the consultation we've had with young people, which I'm really, really proud of them for.
okay, and this, whichever model comes about, or you think may come about, will there be a priority given to flexibility so that people might be able to transition in different areas later on?
Yeah, and I think you've pinpointed one of the areas we exactly those areas that we've found. I think we're strong when it comes to apprenticeships in some areas, but I think if you want to change your job later on in life, there are financial issues around that. There are issues with, simple issues like how you pay your social security, with a family, with a mortgage. But if we want to train our own, we need as an island and as a government to be saying, we will support that. It will have a cost, but as I've said, I think before to this panel, sometimes you have to take that word cost and see it as the word investment, because if we keep people here and they work here, they pay their taxes here a long time, and certainly pay back any investment that we make in them.
We have other questions about that
Yeah,
topic later.
Okay, so...
Sorry,
do you
Chair.
want to-
Can I just, for the public and the record, you mentioned 5 core subjects, Joe. Would you be kind enough to highlight what those 5 core subjects are for the record and for the
5
public?
core
when,
subjects.
when people normally go on to
Yeah.
A-level or employment or
In the
training.
benchmark.
In the JPQ.
Oh, sorry. So
this was
no,
in numeracy.
I was saying that usually the students who enrol on Jersey Progression qualifications have not achieved 4 or 5 grade 4s at secondary school. So it's a year for them to grow and develop and upskill.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
It'd be good
Yeah,
to
so it's a
clarify
broad offer, and the JPQ runs across all as a subject lines: health and social care, construction engineering. So what we did is very much what the minister has said, that there's a pathway into all of the advanced and technical areas. That's what we've worked over for more than 10 years now.
It's effectively to step in, to a level 3 qualification.
Yes.
You have to have your level 2. This is now just boosting up that level 2 qualification to enable people to learn, move on. It may just take some people a little bit longer. It's a really good model.
How many on average is the cohort for the JPQ?
About 140.
It's quite big then.
Yep.
Quite a big cohort.
Yep.
There's such a demand for it, really, isn't there? There's definite
That's
demand.
good.
I mean, it varies year on year. It depends on, I mean, we did experience a bit of growth post-COVID.
Yeah.
Is it 1 year course or 2 year?
It's a 1-year course.
Okay.
Can I ask about, so we talked about inclusivity and also bearing in mind the 4 or 5 core subjects, so that normally would include, they're not core subjects, when you talk about 4 or 5 GCSEs and some students haven't obtained all of those
Yes.
at the standard level, does that normally include English and maths?
Yes. So we provide a retake programme, and approximately, it varies year on year, there's 250 or so retaking maths, and there's over 100 retaking English. We provide that service as well for full-time students, and those numbers we respond entirely to demand. When I started at Highlands College, there was a group of 20 because that demand wasn't being met, and I felt very strongly that it needed to be, so we planned that in as part of our core provision. We expect all of our learners to come out as literate and numerate for the workplace, and I believe also it's part of their citizenship.
Yeah.
Really.
Can I
Their
ask,
life
so
chances.
there will be some of those professions that we consider traditional, like say if you take electricians, plumbers,
Yes.
builders, that there will be lots of those operators in Jersey who don't have English as a first language and who may actually be, and there's no requirement, of course, to need to speak English to be a competent electrician or builder, you could argue.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for those people to be able to take on an apprentice and for that apprentice then to get access to an apprenticeship or an equivalent if they don't
They can
have a good level
access
of
it
English?
without those qualifications. We don't offer English and maths to all the apprentices. We do to full-time students, but not to all the apprentices.
But you've got to remember that apprentices are often 1 day a week, so to actually fit that in with everything else. The other thing about the retakes of English and maths, and I'll say this, you can't say this, Joe, because this is a very political statement. It's partly to do with the obsession of the UK with everyone having level 4 English and maths to move on to any further qualification. Personally, I don't think that is. I think there should be alternatives to that, but we do use the UK system or not. And the last thing we want that somebody from a progression qualification. This does happen a lot.
Yes, yeah.
Moving on to degree level eventually and being told we can't take you for a degree because you haven't got that level 4. So we have to be thinking ahead for those students in ways in which perhaps we don't necessarily want to, but we're trying to equip them so they're not disadvantaged later on.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question following on from the student perspectives report, which was an interesting one. That identified the need to explore a unified timetable, so looking at the vocational side as well as academic. So will there be any consideration given to that, do you think?
I think that's something that really does need to happen in the coming years, absolutely. And there are a number of drivers for that. And can I just say about that report, that was us talking to around 120 students across every single educational establishment on the island, all of them. And I think what they fed back there needs to be listened to. And one of the strong themes from that was that they want to see a more unified approach. They want to be able to choose more about where they're going. And some felt, and it's not a criticism of any institution. They were not criticising institutions they were in. They're very proud of where they were. But they said, you know, sometimes I'm not necessarily doing what I want to do, but I'll put up with it. Now, to me, that was something I didn't want to hear. You'll put up with your next qualification.
Yeah.
If the young people are motivated, let's enable that.
Maybe
That's a sea change.
maybe looking back to even 14 years old, having some more opportunities. for
Absolutely.
vocational
And again, I think that needs to be at the top of the agenda. It goes together with the apprenticeship and post-16 education, and it needs to be right up there in the next debate in the election and then beyond.
They did value what there was already, didn't they?
Yes,
But they
they did.
also wanted more. So just a quick question and then Mark. You mentioned earlier about how important it was to consider the destinations at the end of the course that the person gets to what they want to do. So is that going to be central to considerations around any reviews?
Yeah, because I think it's linked to need and the work we've done with Skills Jersey about targeting need on the island. Because we're a small island, we have to recognise that. And I think what we have to do is target a great deal on the type of things we want to do. Tanya, do you want to say, because you've done a lot of work on this?
The review of the apprenticeship. So one big piece of feedback we got was that there's a lack of awareness of funding for higher level apprenticeships, and we have two schemes. We have an apprenticeship subsidy for level 2 and level 3, and then we have student finance for level 4 and above. And if we're looking at that destination, the pathways, having a unified scheme where people know from an entry level all the way through to higher level apprenticeships, they understand what the funding is available to them, and it's similar and it's designed for apprenticeships. That was a key piece of feedback that we took away and will inform the design of a future scheme.
Well, that's good, and that would come about through Skills Jersey quite a bit, wouldn't it?
What we've got there is a really joined up approach to what we're doing. So we're looking at what industry want, we're looking at where we see the gaps, looking at the structure we have and where the gaps are, then using Skills Jersey to say, where are the gaps in our industries? Put the whole lot together. You have a very effective longer term scheme for training and pathways for the island. It will change because need does change.
Yeah.
Green skills, for example, we've recognised there are some projects coming forward that we can't entirely talk about at the moment because of the people involved in them, but I know Highlands has got a very good project in which we will inform you of as soon as we possibly can.
We've got questions.
Okay, cool.
Yes, Minister, the apprenticeship funding. Stakeholder Perspectives report published on the 5th of January, I have it here, highlighted concerns that limited exposure to vocational pathways during compulsory education may affect how well young people engage with apprenticeship programmes.
Yeah.
So how is the government addressing this issue, and what steps are being taken to ensure that students in compulsory schooling have meaningful access to those?
Yeah, and the first step is exactly that report and that identification. You don't know the problems there until it's identified. Now, we're sort of aware of that, but that is absolute evidence for what we're doing. The next step is to look at how we're going to use our schools and careers information, which I know students talked about as well, which we're absolutely open to inform of those pathways that are available, those opportunities that are available that Tanya spoke about earlier. So one of the things is a lot exists and it can be used. I've got to say, there is going to have to be a difficult conversation for government in this island about the structure of its education system. Because we have a very selective system and we have a very particular system. I'm really choosing my words carefully because I don't want to criticise anyone, because I think everybody's doing a really good job. But it is a very distinct system. You go here or you go there. And one of the things we got from 14-year-olds when we spoke to them was, well, actually, I don't have that much choice because I'm not going to this particular institution, so I'm going to have to go there. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And they actually were absolutely correct.
This was one of the recommendations in our secondary
I
education funding review.
absolutely agree with you. But that step is a brave political step for us, because we're going to have to change the structure of our education system. Now, if the island wants that, great, but you've got to go along with it. And I think we can do that, and I think it's a very effective way to educate our young people.
I will say, just coming back to your question from a personal professional perspective, I think there has been progress along the years, because when I first started as a teaching assistant 20 years ago, it was normally the children who weren't engaging with school that were more put onto those kind of vocational pathways early on. Whereas now, you know, I've been out of education for about 7 years now, but I think what's happening now is that actually we're recognising that some children have strengths in other areas that others don't, and kind of tailoring that to them. So you'll see that a lot of secondary schools are doing sort of like 1 or 2 days a week out of school within mainstream, to go up to Highlands and do sort of like hair and beauty. And I don't know, Joe, if you want to kind of chip in on that,
So
incorporate it with the compulsory.
we already have 170 14 to 16-year-olds on a weekly basis. That's from 2 main feeder schools, Grainville and Hope Valley. It's highly valued by the schools and the students themselves. They find that it motivates those students in the rest of their curriculum in school, because they're doing some practical activities that they enjoy, some hands-on learning. And, you know, and they're able to shine in a different arena.
Gives them confidence.
We're also in discussion. Victoria College has approached me for opening up options for males from that school to access our sixth form. And for some years, I've got a joint provision with Holiest School for Design, Engineering, Construct, which is a fantastic qualification.
That course.
So we are very open to partnerships with people who, you know, any institution that shares the same values as us, which is obviously students first, quality outcomes, and really good progression opportunities. You know, and so we can do it. The abilities, the skills, and everything is there.
Just make a quick point on those 2 points. I think it hits the nail on the head. We have moved from this false distinction between academic and vocational. It's taken us a long time. You know, it was very, oh, hang on, do you mean these things are actually really valuable and just as difficult or just as challenging? And we've got these provisions available, but what we have is a structure of our education system that I still think is an obstacle to that. And that's not a criticism of the institutions themselves, it's the structures we have. And if we are willing to change those, I think we have a huge opportunity on this island.
Can I just ask a quick question about the 170? So you've got 14 to 16-year-olds, but only from Grainville and Hope Valley. Why are you not bringing them in from McKenna and Rocky?
Capacity, isn't
We'd
it?
have a capacity issue. I can't currently meet all the demand from Grainville for motor vehicle because of workshop space. Le Caneve, John Sindel, the new head, would like to open up those options. He's a new head to the island, but he's interested in accessing our vocational offer. See, it's complementary because it's the things that we deliver that they can't do in a school, motor vehicle, hair and beauty, culinary arts, where, but all of those things are in workshop confined spaces. So we're
it's
not
purely
getting onto the
capacity.
new campus, but
Yeah, so it's purely
flexible
capacity.
learning spaces would enable greater access for younger students.
Could I come in with a supplementary? Just on something the Minister said, I mean, I'm glad you made the distinction between, well, I think you were saying there's a false dichotomy often between vocational and academic.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
it's fair to say, I think, that vocational can also include things like becoming a doctor, an astrophysicist,
Yes.
a lawyer.
Yes,
Those are all
exactly, yeah.
vocations because they're to do with jobs. Whereas There can be academic subjects which are not vocational, that studying English, music, French are not necessarily for a vocation. Is there, in your mind, a difficulty in what the baseline education should be, that education should be providing for students who then go on to study possibly vocational courses later?
That's interesting because I think, well, I know you're not remit to go beyond, but if I could just briefly touch on that because of your question. I think up to year 9, up to the age of 14, I think the curriculum is broad-based, and there are projects going on such as the Oracy project, such as the other projects happening in school in terms of developing people as young people, which give that firm basis. I think it's past that age where we ask children to specialise and whether we've got enough choice for them at that point, which are vocational choices. I've used the word, I've contradicted myself, but you know what I mean. You can identify as those types of courses. The design, engineering and construction course is a classic example of that. That does not fit in one of those two areas. It is smack bang on its own and a really good course that is helping people move forward. From construction itself to civil engineering, you can move in a number of different ways. So I think up to that point we are, but yes, I think we need to have a proper discussion on the island about what we want. And if we want to offer these proper pathways and open this for our education system, we will have to break down some of the barriers that have been created over many, many years. And I understand why, because our education system is changing and our needs are changing. But yes, I think earlier on, I think we're better than, you know, we could always be better, I'm sure. But I think it's there are pinch points where we need to look at them carefully. What it does mean, though, is it's achievable, in my view.
Okay.
We're only on question.
Minister, given that grants for higher education are statutory entitlement, do you believe that apprenticeships should similarly become a statutory entitlement, similar to the model used for higher education?
I think the answer to that in the long term has to be yes. It's what we mean by that, what we do with it, and how we do it that is the question. Because for higher apprenticeships, for example, we already pay at the same level through the student grant system. So it sort of exists. Beyond that, though, we have a statutory. Well, you see, again, we have a very mixed system, don't we? We have a statutory requirement for some post 16 to 18 if they're not paying, but for others there's fee paying. So you could say, well, it's only statutory if you can pay for it. So what do we do there? And apprenticeships in a similar way are paid for at a slightly different level. So yes, I think they should be statutory, but I think once we do that, we can then have a statutory age up to 18 for education on the island. And I think that would be the step. Because if you make that step, you then have to make sure that everyone is provided for.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in the past, and I think I can understand why, because we can't guarantee everyone's provided for. The two go hand in hand. It's a symbiotic relationship, if you like. One feeds on the other, and if you get it right, it will work well in the long term.
And what steps are you taking?
Very long yes, sorry. I just wanted to qualify my yes. But go on.
What steps are you taking to ensure that apprenticeship funding provides equitable access and progression opportunities to young people?
What do you mean by equitable access? You mean post the qualification? Yeah, this is what we said about destinations and the value of the qualification. I don't know, I mean, once a qualification has been completed and somebody's qualified, I would hope that they would have a destination to go to. You know, if we're training 1,000, I don't know, whatever example I give now, I'm going to get picked up on. If we had Stuart, you know, we trained a certain number of people in one area, and we've now got we don't need to do that anymore. And so we train, but that's about being adaptive. I think that's the answer to your question. If we are adaptive, we can make sure that it happens, and that comes from the work that Skills has done. Do you want to talk briefly?
Absolutely, yes.
And my next question relates to that as well, if I may.
Yes.
Minister, could you outline what collaboration has taken place between your department and the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development in relation to lifelong vocational learning and future skills provision?
So we'll start with Stuart, and then perhaps you want to talk about how you apply. Is that the right place? Go on,
No,
Stuart.
Yes, yeah. So actually linking it to the talk about actually if we make it apprenticeship statutory entitlement, then we need to bring back to your question earlier about how do we make sure that young people are learning about what career pathways are available and how they link to jobs in Jersey. That's the beauty of the Skills Jersey setup that really started at the beginning of last year, where you've got the data analysis side, pulling in what's actually out there in industry, data-wise and evidence-based, accompanied by knowledge from local employers. So we're pulling all that information in. We've also then got the careers guidance team that act as an impartial unit that go around all of our schools. They're the team that push that information out. So if we can widen the understanding that's evidence-based and factual about what we need in this island now and in the future, young people can then start really planning what pathways they want to follow. If it's then also an entitlement and they can access those to whatever payment is needed, you've got a perfect system there. And it's actually the system that the UK white paper recently wants England to turn towards using. If we then also include what we were talking about with how do we work with economic development to make sure we do, I sit as a link bridge, or the head of skills does, link bridge to the economic development team. Work very closely when we do all the data analysis to find out what are the labour market gaps, what are the vacancy gaps. We work with them and use data together, so we analyse all the data together. The knowledge gathering piece where you're talking to employers, we go out and do that ourselves, but then also connect with the local economy team, we're underneath the education economy team department, and make sure that what we're hearing from this side matches what they're hearing from an economic side when they go and talk to agriculture, construction, retail, hospitality. And we take that knowledge piece, which is really strong in Jersey, because we can get out there direct with employers, whereas in the UK, they're very jealous that they can't do that. We then take all of that, compare it to the data. That's where we get our skills priorities list. But also beyond that, we don't just say what technical skills do we need. We look at things like the Odyssey project that was mentioned, the soft skills. Employers saying, actually, we would like young people to be able to come out and speak in public. Okay, we've responded to that with the Odyssey project. So there is a very strong link between ourselves and the economy. And we're always looking to improve it as well, to make sure that we are getting everything we can out of the relationship. So actually at the start of this year, we're about to start our data analysis again. And myself and Kirsty Pearson have already in conversations about, well, what other data's out there? What else is there that we can get that will help us with these decisions?
Yeah.
Good. Can I just add, on a ministerial level as well, we've got the HAWAG Plus group that are cross ministerial colleagues. So we've got the Education Minister, the Economy Minister, Housing and Social Security, and obviously we've got Stuart that often contributes to those meetings, and Tim Holvey as well. So on a ministerial level as well. Sorry? HAWAG Plus, yeah. And the Chief Minister. So, and that's how we kind of keep in contact on a ministerial level as well, and make sure that information is shared and any kind of issues are raised and dealt with.
Can I ask a supplementary? So the premise for apprenticeship seems to be primarily an economic driver. So you're saying you wouldn't want people to do courses if they don't necessarily result in jobs, or if they don't equip the student to have a job. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I've said that, but I think that is, if you like, that is a driver behind it, absolutely. Yeah. However, I would say that I think that is the nature of the beast. The people who are going into that line of training are doing it because they want a job at the end of it for those things. I understand what you mean, but I think there is also a wider qualitative element to apprenticeship skilling up.
Is there a risk that where budgets are being squeezed, and there will, I think the report that you've just come out with shows some areas of consensus, but also of disagreement, and I think there's a political reality at the moment that money is tight.
Oh, yeah.
Is there going to be any pressure in future for certain courses which don't produce a vocational outcome? So let's think about ordinary degrees which are in philosophy, languages, music, etc. There's no requirement for you to study that, then show that that's linked to a job. Is there going to be pressure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's a wider education question. I personally would not want to see that. I think education in those areas is vital as well for a society.
But if someone wanted to study to be an electrician but didn't want to get a job as an electrician, they just wanted to do it for the fun of being an electrician, would that be acceptable?
Probably worth saying that they would be in a job as an electrician if they're on the apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah.
So they'd already be there.
But could you study electronic engineering without having a...
At this moment, not as an apprentice, because by nature of the beast...
You could study electronic engineering.
I don't know if there is an electronic engineering course that exists on its own on the island. No, that is a good, it's more of a philosophical point, I would say. I mean,
But I think
sorry, just saying, I look more at that is that you train as an electrician and realise at the end actually you want to change your career after a few years, and that's, I think, something we need to enable so that you can have that change.
The next question actually relates to that, if I may.
Have I answered that? Is that okay?
Minister, the apprenticeship funding review highlighted stakeholder concerns that restrictions on prior qualifications preventing funding for more than one qualification of the same level, at the same level, which closing off a key entry point into apprenticeships, particularly to those seeking career changes, as has been just highlighted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you intend to remove this restriction, and what steps are being taken to ensure apprenticeships funding supports career changes as well as school leavers?
Do you want to talk about the specific work we've done that, and then I'll sort of sum it up?
So that restriction does not apply to level 2, level 3 apprenticeships. It was a question to the stakeholders. Would that be an appropriate restriction to put in place in a new scheme? If not, why not? What were the problems that you would envisage? And that was exactly the problem that they envisaged if we introduced that restriction. So it exists for higher education, which is typically degrees. So somebody already has a degree, they are not eligible to access funding for a second degree. But the funding for level 2, level 3 apprenticeships is your first apprenticeship. So if somebody had, for example, an A level, a level 3 qualification, currently they are able to apply to do a level 2 and or a level 3 apprenticeship and access the subsidy. So that restriction does not exist currently. We were testing to see if it would be appropriate to introduce it at the lower level.
I think we were also thinking about at the degree level, actually. Is there any plans to change that? So somebody might have a degree, we talked about this earlier, around teaching, for example, and then want to change to perhaps looking into psychology or something like that later on.
I mean, I noticed that your terms of reference said about not doing post-16, so we haven't done a lot, but that is certainly something we will need to look at. However, I will say we do fund with grants degrees. It doesn't happen everywhere, and there will be a budgetary limitation because we spend a lot of money on degrees, and if somebody has done their first degree and completed it, whether we would fund another second degree, I think is a decision that has to be made longer term. It may well be that we come to specific areas of need for the island, or transferring degrees into a different area is the first stage in that. So, for example, if you train as I can't think of a prime example, if you train as a doctor, I don't know why I said doctor. That's a worse example, actually.
Example could be if you wanted to retrain to be a social worker.
If you want to retrain, that's the most. Thank you.
It's examples like that.
We would
yes, and it's something that the island, the minister may then want to consider changing.
So that might be looked at and changed.
It'd be an area of need.
I think it'd be an area of need afterwards, but again, that's higher education, which we didn't think was in the remit.
It comes into sort of lifelong learning.
Okay. I will say, though, that if you have a first degree, you can do the JTTP, which requires a degree, so you could have a career change, theoretically trained as a teacher on Ireland. So these models do already exist here.
Some of the credits can be used so that you don't have to do the full second degree, you only have to do part of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Helen.
Thank you. I had some questions specifically around the role of Highlands. So you're principal provider of vocational learning in Jersey. Can you tell us really what your key challenges are at the moment?
You'll be well versed in the physical environment of the estate, but it's worth revisiting because it touches on a number of areas: accessibility for 14 to 16-year-olds, accessibility for disabled learners, and some safeguarding challenges with the 11 buildings, 2 sites. We've done cyber simulations and business continuity plan. It's very difficult to lock down the site, worst case scenario, presently if we needed to. So there's a number of issues that the estates provide pretty much almost on a daily basis, to be honest. Then the changing UK qualification framework. So the Minister's already pointed out, and with his support and the policy officer, my vice principal, has been working with that. I have a partnership agreement, I should mention that, an MOU with Guernsey Institute and with the Isle of Man, and I've been working in partnership with them for more than 5 years. And some of the benefits is that we approach these kind of challenges as jurisdictions together. Obviously, we've got a greater voice if we're talking about thousands rather than hundreds. So we are working with them and presenting the challenges that we face with T levels, which are now going to be V levels, etc., etc. So we do, that's a constant piece of work for us. As well, the whole kind of future of vocational learning. And it's true, we do have good work with economy, you know, we will be commissioned by areas of government to do work, like the fiscal stimulus, where we had 1,400 adults that came through our doors, working together with Digital Jersey in partnership. We also did social recovery with adults with literacy and numeracy. So that kind of ongoing commissioning work, I think, will grow, because we've got an ageing demographic, we've got AI challenges, which some exceptional work that was done by PwC says is going to have, and is already having an impact on entry-level jobs in finance, our biggest employer. So we would be central to any kind of career switching, upskilling, reskilling.
And how are you preparing for that?
So we're preparing for it by our engagement with working together with Skills Jersey through the Skills Fund. So we'll have demand that's coming in through there. We also sit on every sector board, so we're engaged with all the sector demands. And the area where I believe there are further opportunities is in LMI, labour market intelligence. You know, you have hard and soft labour market intelligence. I'd like to see a portal that you could access centrally that looked at future trends. What are the future trends that we can look at as a jurisdiction that we're going to need to meet? And we're going to have to start building it now. There's some things we know. So how many nurses are we going to need for the hospital? Who's going to build the hospital? Well, probably my carpenters, my bricklayers, my plumbers, my electricians.
And are those conversations happening?
They are, and there's opportunity to sorry, Minister, to develop
No, I was
that.
going to say, I'm so pleased that you're saying it, and I think that is, to a large extent, that is the point of starting to talk about lifelong learning.
It's about joining the dots,
Yes,
isn't it?
but what you do is you open up this Pandora's box and say, okay, so what do we mean? Well, this is what we mean. We haven't got a choice.
So are you comfortable, Minister, that there is a structure in place that captures
Good question.
these sorts of conversations? The hospital is a really good example, isn't it, for everybody we're going to?
Okay, there's two things I'll say to that, and I'll just stretch a little bit from your question is, am I comfortable that the structures are in place? Not yet, and this is exactly the work that we've been doing. We've been working with policy officers in the college and Skills Jersey to say, what will that structure look like? And it needs to change. We get that, and that's about transitioning between jobs. In the long term, in terms of, is the structure in place regards the projects that are coming out? I think there is. The hospital is in a very early stage of that at the moment, but I think, yes, absolutely, with Skills Jersey about those needs. I think there is something going on with us training. There has been identification of one training need, which you want to...
Absolutely. So we work closely. There's a great example of the construction hub that's run, which is industry all together coming together with government to discuss what are the needs going to be. Included in there is the procurement department within government. So we are now working closely with them. So as they put out big contracts, e.g. the hospital is the most obvious one, when they're getting the tenders coming back in and it's saying what work needs to be done and what skills are needed, we are then using that as part of our analysis to say, okay, in the future, several years from now, are we going to need more low carbon heating technicians? Are we going to need more air conditioning so that we've got a solution? We also look at the other way as well. So, for example, when Belazan was redesigned, we did a similar project then and worked with them to identify there was a certain skill for bending steel. And we were looking at it going, right, well, we're going to need that. Loads of steel needs bending. And then we looked into it and said, actually, this skill, you're only going to need it once. Once we've done this, we won't need it for another 20 years. Let's not set up a course at Highlands to send people off the wrong path. So we do both sides of the coin, what's needed and what's not.
So really the key to sort of completing the jigsaw is that Skills Jersey are at the table. Highlands as the main vocational provider are at the table.
Yes, absolutely.
Strategically, Who is leading on this then? Does this come down to the chair of HAWAG?
What do you mean, who's leading on?
You know, the overview of it, you know, is it, does that come from within
If I'm
sort of
honest,
the Chief
I'm not.
Minister's?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the overview of the entire skills provision of the island, I don't know whether that's, if I'm absolutely straight down the line, whether that will ever be possible for one individual to do that. I think what it means is that departments, as we do, communicate with each other well, as we've got those bridging parts.
And I think that HAWAG Plus group as well is a vehicle to
That's
that as
where
well.
it feeds
Yeah,
feeds
because-
So that wouldn't be one minister, that'd be one group.
But
Yeah.
that's the point.
Yeah, yeah, I
That's
see.
the-
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
yeah.
it's the Chief
The chair
Minister.
of the
Sorry,
agreement
that was-
ensures
yeah,
that
yeah,
that
get it,
coordination. Just a final one for me, because I'm conscious of time. Where are we with the progress on the feasibility study for the new Highlands College?
I think we're looking at sites. I think there were sites identified, but I think there's a reluctance to talk about sites early on because, do you want to talk
Has
about
there
it?
been a budget allocated to provide?
Not at the moment, no, but I am putting together all the information required for the business case for that to happen.
I think that is a huge step forward, by the way, and I think that. But can I just say, these two things go hand in hand, and I think we talked about this the other day, Joe. We have an opportunity here to get the pathways and the model for what our apprenticeship scheme will look like, our training schemes will look like, not just from 16, but way beyond it and throughout people's lives. And beyond that. And then we build facilities that are built, purpose-built for what we want to provide in the areas that we have. So, for example, if we need more motor mechanic areas, we know when we're building that we're going to have those flexible spaces that we talk about. If we are training for the hospital and we want health and social care, I visited a school once in the US and they had an entire ward set up with a bed and so on, and this is from their 14 to 19 school. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, it's exactly what you wanted. And that's the type of thing. We have got an opportunity here to build the right thing for the right needs. But we've got to identify them first, and we're on the pathway to doing that. It's got to be the top of the agenda for who comes next.
Yeah, thank you. Minister, I think you've answered a lot of the questions about access to courses and accessibility generally. So I won't dwell on those unnecessarily. What I wanted to delve into a little bit more is the dual role which I think any education system has got. On the one hand, it needs to, as we're seeing here, be sensitive to the needs of the market. So it needs to make sure that the population are ultimately have the requisite skills or can get the skills as they need them. But do you accept that there's an underlying wider educational role that you as minister have, or any minister has, to make sure that any students, when they leave school, whether it's at the age of 14, they don't leave at 14 nowadays, but they might change courses at 14, at 16 or 18, or later actually have the capacity for lifelong learning. Do you think that, are you confident that currently, when a student reaches, let's say, 16, that they will have all of the skills that they need to be able to meet those challenges in the future?
That's a difficult one to say, that every student have all the skills they need to meet the challenges of the future, because you could say at that point, well, you don't need to train them anymore. But I think we do equip our young people with the skills to move forward. Yes, absolutely. They could be better. What I think we don't have, and this is what was identified in the report from students elsewhere, is the open choices that they need to go to. And that is going to be a difficult conversation, because there is a lot of tradition in the way that we do things. But tradition doesn't solve our problems.
I think there's also the point that once people hit adulthood, having that awareness, and I think we spoke about that yesterday in our discussions, that, you know, it's not always clear as an adult where you can go to do a certain course, and whether you can get funding and support and all of those kind of things. I don't know if either of you want to kind of chip in there with some of the discussions we were having.
What I was getting at is that Joe mentioned an interesting idea about saying there needs to be some kind of portal so that there can be information about assessing future changes.
Got it, yeah.
But is there a problem that ultimately there's always going to be surprises in the economy? So things can happen at the drop of a hat, and
absolutely.
you know, whole sectors can be decimated, and
Especially AI and
skill
things
sets
like that.
change rapidly. So
However, exactly that. And this is why we need to build a system that is strong enough and flexible enough to deal with the changes as they come. So there is a clear pathway. If you need to change your skills, we can tell you how you can do that. And we can tell you the provision that's available, and we've got the facilities to do that. Now, that might just be, you know, a midlife change in your skill. I wouldn't say a midlife crisis, but you know, a midlife decision to change your skill. I think, you know, we hear so many times you'll have 3 or 4 different jobs in your lifetime. Absolutely. So we've got to enable that. The important point for Jersey is we are a small island. And if we want to train our own, we need to offer those training facilities. We have started, and we are well into that dialogue now. But I say, as I said at the beginning, to make it a lovely little circle, we don't start from a 0 point. We've got a lot of things that are in place, but they just need to be encompassed. But I agree with you. Equipping young people to be able to make those choices is a really important thing. I think it's better than it ever has been, but it's not perfect. So I'm not entirely sure what the next step is in terms of what they need to be equipped with.
The next question really then is that if we accept the fact, and hopefully you will, that it's the education department's job to make sure students can read, write and have soft skills to go on, whether it's for work or to be a citizen. It's probably a wider partnership when it comes to jobs training for the market. So could you talk to us about how you see the interaction between the different government departments and also the employers, for example?
Yeah, well, I think that first of all, we need to recognise that interaction already there with the work of Highlands in training young people to go out into the workplace. That already exists. So we do a lot of work in government and a lot of investment to train for our workplace, which are an economic stimulus for our island. If private providers or company providers want to provide training, we need to enable that. Now, that isn't perfect at the moment, and we need to look at funding models across the board to make those sustainable, to take away those distinctions. We want to do that. But one of the key features of anything I think that government is involved with is it comes with a level of quality, so we know what we're getting at the end of it. If we're going to fund something from a different provider, we need to ensure that the quality is there. I mean, I'm sure Joe I'll be getting a burning sensation when I say this. But in our colleges and our schools, they are under rigorous observation all of the time to make sure that the quality is there and what's being delivered. We have regimes for review and so on and so forth. We want to support any provider that is good for this island. We do need employers to step up as well and want to do that. But we want to ensure that we can encourage that, enable that, and make sure that happens. So that's a really important point. So I think there is a relationship there to be had. It does exist already. We don't start from a 0 point. This is not a world of absolutes, but we do need to improve it. But I think there is a responsibility there if you're on the island and you're in part of our economy that, you contribute, but you get something back from us as well.
So I've just got a few more tangible questions, perhaps. What steps are you taking to increase the exposure to vocational pathways during compulsory schooling, and do you have a timeline for that?
I mean, there are specific courses like the DEC course, which I think is across all of our schools now, which is a really good course. There have been courses that exist that might be called vocational for many, many years. Culinary arts, go into culinary arts, I don't know what they call it now in schools. Food technology, it was called for a while. I forget what it's called now. There are D&T courses, etc., etc. We are somewhat shackled, I think, sometimes by GCSE. I think some of the qualifications have gone that were more vocational qualifications at level 2. I think you'd agree in terms of those really good BTECs and City and Guilds and those really good classic qualifications. I think that's a shame, and I think we need to look again at those. But that's because it's been driven by the UK. I mean, they have a particular model of education, which is a real shame. So I think there are things that exist. Could we do more? Absolutely. But I'm going to say it again. We need to ensure that the pathways afterwards are clear for our young people. And they have clearly told us that they need more choice, they need more openness beyond 16, because I think if you get that right, you have a different audience at 14. If you can genuinely say to a young person at 14, and we've been there as teachers, oh, I don't want to do this, there's no point. Like say, oh, hang on a second, there really is a point. Here you go, here's your choice. Here's what you could do into the future. What are you interested in? And that's when you get young people buying into their education, their training, and you end up with a really successful system.
Okay.
Right. Actually, there was a question here which I'll ask then. It was just about that higher level apprenticeships that you mentioned before, and people don't generally know about them very much. So is there a plan on how to improve the visibility around what's
I think
available?
that will be part of the design of a new apprenticeship funding scheme. I think what's happened is the education landscape has evolved, and degree apprenticeships didn't really exist until around 10 years ago, 2015. and there were, I think, around 9 degree apprenticeships at that time, and now you've got over 170. So the awareness that that is a pathway is increasing, and you know, we have a scheme called an apprenticeship subsidy. It's intuitive that that is for funding for an apprenticeship, but the student finance scheme is generally spoken about in the context of university education and traditional academic degrees. So I think it's just people that don't really associate that student finance scheme as something that is available to them for a higher level apprenticeship. So that, when I talked before about a unified scheme that covers all levels of an apprenticeship pathway, part of that will be quite a big piece around communicating that to the public and making sure people understand what it means. And I think using the word apprenticeship across all the levels will be that really clear message that it covers all those levels of education.
And then children get to hear about this in schools as well, do they? About the possible pathway ahead?
That's yes, the skills mentors, the careers advisors at Skills Jersey, they go into the schools and they cover all of those.
Then so if it helps, there was something that came out of the post-16 report where very much young people were saying that they receive careers guidance, they love the kind of events that we run that highlight the different areas, but they want more of it. So we're already beginning to look at current resource, how can we actually do more with our resource to make sure people are aware. And part of that is actually doing it smarter. So take back to the question we had earlier about how do we link some of the more normal subjects to things that we use in the workplace, and how do we make sure young people are connecting those dots, and our teachers and parents as well. So for example, if we always say we need leadership skills, if you look at the connection and what is the main indicator of what great leaders we've got and review what got them there, is quite often they've studied history to a higher than normal level, and that's a common indicator of a good leader is they've studied history. Likewise, problem solving. You look at the core subjects that really deal with problem solving. You've got your sciences, an obvious one, but also you've got your music and your sport and your creative studies. Now, if we help young people and parents to join the dots between, okay, in history I'm learning also to become a leader, and actually when I'm frustrated with learning the trombone, I'm actually learning problem solving skills. That helps to really highlight to young people what these skills are and what courses might lead to their future.
And I think that addresses slightly what Monty was talking, sorry, the deputy was talking about there, which is this idea of, you know, perhaps it's a false dichotomy to say we're training for a job. Where education is education is education. For some of it, you know, you'll be better equipped for a specific role, but you will improve because you are educated in some way. It is a really important life skill. It is what separates us as a civilised and forward-thinking society from those that are not. The level of education we provide.
We've only got just
Do
a few
you mind if I finish off that? Because it's important for you to know. We do budding chefs, budding construction camps with younger children in conjunction with Skills Jersey, so they get access and tasters to those sort of provisions at a younger age. I'm also chair of the Higher Education Advisory Board, so at the top end we've been discussing, I've got the careers people on the board representing directly. So what we're doing is we're having a lot of role models of people who are currently studying degrees, case studies, who are going to go in to talk to students about those sort of apprenticeship pathways as well.
Okay.
So it's coming from both ends.
That's good.
Can I just ask very quickly? I mean, we've been focusing a lot on young people. I think that's quite right because it is them who are using these pathways. But are there older examples of people in Jersey who are needing apprenticeships to change career paths?
Funny enough, there's very few 16 to 18 apprentices.
It's about 20% 16 to 19, about another 30% at the middling range, and 50% of them are 25 plus on the current
Would you ever get like
apprenticeship
40, 50-year-olds?
Yeah, we do. In fact, one of my outstanding lecturers did a degree in English and history and then retrained as a motor mechanic and teaches for us. So we do have people who come from degree provision who want to go on to apprenticeships. Yes, we do.
So and that's thank you for the question because it's important we point that out.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think there's just time for probably one more question, and this is around a practical sort of thing. Some of these submissions to our review have suggested introducing training blocks that would allow small businesses and sole traders to share apprentices across employers, and of course a lot of our businesses are small businesses. So is there any consideration of that proposal or steps being taken to reduce the barriers for smaller employers?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Again, I would say with all of these, we have to ensure the quality of delivery. That's important. I think the right person has to fit into something that might be blocks in different areas, because you're asking somebody perhaps to move to different situations during their workforce. But yeah, I think that is exactly.
Could be advantages in it
Yeah,
too,
absolutely,
couldn't
there could.
Focus from the small businesses.
And also
well.
that variety of
Yeah, the
experience
variety, yeah.
and some personalities, dare I say, will really thrive from that. Sort of thing I would have loved to do.
So you think that could work?
Yeah, absolutely, I think it could. But again, it's part of what we've been doing in terms of now's the time to look at the whole. Where do we want to go with this? We've got some real good stuff in there, but where there are gaps, how are we going to address them? And the simple thing is, into the long term, we will need to look at the funding models of these, and it may cost, but as I say, I'm finished with this, that cost is an investment in the island, and I think we'll get the money back in spades.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've sort of come to an end, unless anyone needed to ask something quickly or... No?
Okay.
Not really, no. Well, there was some green skills, but no, I think we
We
can send those to you.
Yeah, we can talk to you about those, because there's a lot going on there, and it would be good if we did actually,
Yeah.
for your report. That would be
Okay.
really good.
Well, we have got some questions
Yeah,
we've sent to you in
Okay.
writing.